This podcast was created as a part of Podcast Lab by India Film Project in association with Anchor by Spotify.
I came to stories first as a listener, as everyone does when we're kids. And while for many the make-believe world is a stepping stone or phase on their journey to understand and utilize language, for me, that phase never ended. I have been forever obsessed with stories. Watching, reading, listening, wherever, whenever, whether it's old school Bollywood songs or 90s melodramatic musicals or foreign films or proper sci-fi from books and movies, or the vast universe of video games and interactive stories, I've fed on it all. So, after having spent a couple decades on the listening side of stories, I naturally found myself shifting perspectives and on the telling side of stories. Every character, every line, every story I've ever made up started as a voice in my head. And it took me those first 2 decades to start listening to them, opening myself up to creative thinking and creating a healthy barrier between my personal thoughts and my creative thoughts. Basically, the difference between what I think and what a potential character thinks. Understanding this difference has been crucial for my education in storytelling and in becoming a more self-aware me. And I've now spent a decade on this side. And I am madly in love with this world. Every day, I get to be creative, spontaneous, obnoxious, ridiculous, all because I get to call myself a writer and a storyteller. And when you're the storyteller, you know what it's like to be the story listener in the audience because you're still that kid. You know the power, the responsibility, and most importantly, the joy of this job. When I write something, when I narrate a story, I'm always talking to that one person in the audience, that one kid who wants to be entertained, who wants to be taken into a world of make-believe and for a few moments believe that this world is real. As creative and uninhibited my job requires me to be, the only thing I can't imagine is a better way to spend my days on this planet. And that's why I love telling stories.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. I'm your host Sangeeta, aka the Moody Marshmallow. You just heard our guest for today, Lakshya Datta. Laksh is the founder and CEO of Launchora, a storytelling community and narrative podcast company. Launchora is home to over 240,000 storytellers and over 14 million readers. Before that, he used to work with M&A advisory firms and was a lecturer of finance. Today, Laksh is best known for his Hindi language fiction podcasts around romance and has been featured on lists for top podcasts by JioSaavn and GQ. I'm so excited to talk to him about his journey as a writer and creator and some really cool projects he's working on. Welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. This week is a very special episode. I have with me Lakshya Datta. Before bringing him on, I just want to give a quick note to listeners here. This episode is special because Lakshya's podcast, Poetry Darbar, is one of the inspirations behind the Closet Writer Chronicles. So it's a really big deal for me to be talking to him today, and I'm really looking forward to having him on. So without further ado, hi Laksh, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sangeeta. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad that that show inspired you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think just to kind of, dive right in, first question I usually ask all my guests is how and when did you start writing? And when did you realize that, this was something you wanted to do professionally?
So I think as many writers would agree, you kind of you dissociate the idea that what you're watching on a screen or what you're reading is something that a person made when you're young, when you're experiencing all these things. So I did start telling stories when I was still a kid, playing with like GI Joes and stuff. That's what my parents tell me. So I think I became a storyteller way before I became a writer. Writing didn't start until college because I grew up in Delhi and went to school here, and there was now kids have a lot of options for creative expression, but my school definitely didn't. We never wrote an essay, never wrote anything fiction in school. In college is when one of my professors said that you can skip the final exam if you write a short story related to what this course is about. And the course was culture, art, and technology. So he said that, if anyone wants to attempt to face my criticism as a writer, write something fiction that if we like it, that's your final grade. Like it. So I was like, yeah, I don't like studying for the final. It's also, education was always very result oriented. So I was like, this sounds like fun. What I didn't know is that for Americans, like writing is more common than it is for us. Creative expression is more common. So I ended up writing what turned out to be a short story. And it was basically a very dystopian 1984 style. Wow. The world has gone and collapsed. And my first paragraph, I killed 95% of the Earth's population.
Oh my God.
That's how it all started. So I think I got a lot out of my system for however I felt about humanity at 19. That's how it started. And when I could do it professionally, it's still weird to call it a profession.
Okay.
Because, a doctor gets a degree and then they get hired to do a job in a hospital. Right. But a writer is someone who is like, I type stuff and would you like to pay for it? It sounds like a weird thing to say. It's you are so insecure, but you also are so full of this ego that says what I have to say is new and what I have to say is different. So it deserves to be, I deserve to charge money for it or something. So all of that has taken, 10 years to really figure it out. I started writing in college in 2008 or 9. Started my company Launchora in 2014. Started writing for my own platform as a way to get other people to take writing seriously, that anyone can do it. And professionally, I think I told myself that I'm a writer maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's very, it's weird to just say it, Yeah.
No, I completely relate because I feel like I'm in that phase where I still don't know if I want to call myself a professional writer, because even when I'm introducing myself and I say, oh, I'm a writer, I still say it with a bit of hesitation because it's a bit strange. I get what you mean.
You let them know that you are judging yourself more than they can judge you.
This is very true. Yes, I relate so hard to that. And, speaking of Launchora, which I think is just an amazing platform, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost reminds me a little bit, it's similar to Wattpad in a way. So But anyway, so I wanted to ask you, how did the idea for Launchora come about? And then from an idea, taking it to a startup, and then to, you've pretty much created a niche for yourself with Launchora today. So what has that journey been like, and how did it all begin?
It started with what I would call like I think Malcolm Gladwell called it something way smarter than I'm going to describe it to be, but it's a undesirable adversity.
Okay.
I was in the US. I was struggling to figure out the next phase of my career. I was teaching, didn't feel like finance was going to be my thing. I did think creative expression needs to be explored as an open platform where it shouldn't feel like publishing companies and all these people who claim that they know what creativity is and they know what the audience wants, that they are the gatekeepers of this ecosystem of creative storytelling. So I thought, why not create something that is a combination of everything, where I think my first tagline for like what is Launchora. So Launchora as a word came about because I thought of launch and Pandora. That Pandora is from, like Greek mythology. It's the box that you're not supposed to open, and everything got released. And all that was left was hope. And I was like, what better way to describe a writer's brain is Pandora's box? Because it's filled with a lot of darkness. It's filled with a lot of doubt and insecurity. And it's filled with a lot of existential angst about why we exist and why we're born and what we're meant to do and why is the world so horrible, but it also has so much hope in it.
Yeah.
And then you somehow put a splash of some color of fiction into it.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to help people launch creativity into the universe. So that's what the idea was. But because I was still on a visa in the US and I was still working, it all just, it became a necessity for me to feel like I still have some control over what happens to my career. Because at that point, it felt like the country in America was deciding what I get to do with my career. Because you're not allowed to work outside your visa. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. So Launchora felt like an escape. And then eventually when I did decide to come back to India and my visa there was no longer going to be viable for the career I wanted, I moved back to India and I was like, okay, I'm back home. Writing is something I always thought is something that I feel connected to.
Right.
Why don't I start my writing journey by starting a platform where anyone else can also start their writing journey? So it was always meant for ages like 13 to 25. It was really that school, college, young adult life where you are experimenting with creative thought, where you're writing poetry, where you're writing fiction, where you're writing just your life's thoughts. So yeah, that's how it all began in 2014.
Wow. Yeah. And today, I think Launchora is doing some incredible work, just even with the podcast you're producing.
Yeah.
And
it was a writing platform for the first 4 years. And then 3 years ago, I decided to start an internal podcast for the community. Because we ended up having just so many people reach out to me for questions about writing, and I couldn't answer everyone. So I even made an online community for all this, but they still wanted my opinion on things. And I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm not answering questions. So I started a podcast called Story Talking, which was just me interviewing other writers similar to, what the Closet Writer Chronicles is. And getting questions answered by people who are way more creative than me. And I did over 100 of those episodes with 100 storytellers from the community, from outside the community. And then eventually it just felt like audio is a quick way to get information. Reading is losing its touch a little bit, especially with the younger audiences, because Instagram was becoming huge. TikTok is now super huge.
Yeah.
And you just feel like everyone's attention is limited. And I didn't want to be a snob about it. Like, no, you have to read what I write. Because I write like long stuff. Everything I write is usually at least half an hour to an hour, if not 3 hours or now like 6 hour shows. So I thought audio sounds like the right medium to expand the storytelling universe that I'm trying to, create here. So then Launchora got into podcasting. Yeah. And now we've made 15 separate audio shows of some are active, some were meant to be limited, some are seasonal, some are regular.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to my next question. How do you manage to create and kind of produce so many shows? Because I would assume there's some sort of, I'm sure you're doing some of them simultaneously, is my assumption. So how does that work?
It's weird. It's almost like I want to make up for feeling unproductive when I'm procrastinating.
Okay.
Because when you're writing, there was this thing I used to say, I'm always writing, but I'm not always typing, you know? And that was the thing I needed to tell myself when I did feel like I didn't write anything today. But no, I didn't type anything today, but I did write something. I did come up with something that'll eventually lead to a character, lead to a story. So in order to make up for those gaps where I felt like I'm not doing anything, I was like, okay, I'll start another podcast and it'll be about this, or I'll start this podcast and it'll be about this. So I'm able to start all these things because I kind of, I've done the long shows, which are over 100 episodes each. But I also do shows that are only like 6 episodes. I did a jazz documentary for audio, which was only 5 episodes, but it was meant to be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And it should feel like a feature length documentary, but it's all audio. So I liked experimenting with the medium, where it's not like my podcast, I'm running 15 shows every week. It's I like seasons. I like the idea, like I finished this season, it was 13 episodes, and then I'll come back to it next year and I'll move on. But just the last 3 months were very interesting because I was running 3 separate fiction shows at the same time.
Wow.
And each week was like editing 3 separate episodes of 3 different shows. And I would get people messaging me who are like binging whatever I've already put out. And they'd be like, why aren't you just putting all episodes up together at once? And I would tell them, because it literally takes me, 3 days to edit, record, and all this stuff. It's a long process. And I literally can't do more than 3 episodes per week.
That's insane. The fact that you're doing 3 episodes a week, I can't even imagine what kind of work goes in. I can just about do 1 per week, but maybe someday, hopefully I'll get there. But
I mean, you don't aim for it. You definitely don't aim to make too much. And then, but then a funny thing happened, like December 31st, I finished the last episode of my last series that was ongoing, fiction stuff, like, because nonfiction, I'm producing stuff that goes seasonally and all that. But I was January 1st, I woke up and I had nothing. I had nothing to record, nothing to edit, nothing to write, nothing to produce. That was just mine. And it felt very weird to be like, oh, okay, so this is what it feels like to not have 3 shows at the same time. Yeah. It was nice for a day. And then on the second, I started writing something else because I had to,
Yeah, because it really led me to kind of thinking, have you ever experienced creative burnout? And have you ever felt the need to take a break?
I think I take breaks like every day. And I call it TV, I call it Audible. I barely read books anymore. I listen to books. I call it my PlayStation. It's these are all the outlets I have where I'm like, I need to do at least an hour of non-work thing at the end of the day. It's either going to be a TV show, it's going to be a movie, but in the end, it's all absorbing someone else's creative thought. It's like video games, I can play and listen to a book at the same time. So that's two
Oh,
separate
wow.
mediums. I feel very productive. But movies and TV shows, yeah, you focus, you listen, and I basically watch these things for the writing, and just be like, okay, I didn't do anything super productive today. I'm going to watch a movie. I did a lot of productive stuff today. I'm going to watch a very simple comedy. So I I come up with whatever feels like at the end of the day is what I need, so that tomorrow I don't feel even a single second of like, oh, I have to work today. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
ever want to feel that. So I try to insert little moments of joy in
Okay.
every day. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. But yeah, I think coming to, your fiction podcast, interestingly, I came across an article that called you the voice of romance, of the audio space.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
if I have to be a little honest here, I heard two of your shows, and I completely agree with that tag. And I think you're on your way, if you aren't already, the Shah Rukh Khan of podcasting, to be honest.
That's very sweet.
But, that kind of just leads me to ask, what is it that you seem to love about love stories, that you seem to be producing a lot of shows around the subject of love?
I don't want it to sound super mechanical, but it really is keeping the audience's time as my first priority. I do think, and I've learned this with Hit and Trial by making all these nonfiction shows, which end up being 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on how long the interviews are or how long the content is. And I would just start seeing people connect differently to nonfiction than they do to fiction. When I started making fiction, the feedback was just tenfold. The way they would connect, the way they would wait for another episode, the way they would kind of remember what they heard after they heard it. With nonfiction, you kind of feel like, okay, I took in that information and now I'm going to move on. But with stories, I'm not reinventing the wheel or anything. Stories are the best form of communicating emotion and thought at the same time. So for me, knowing that the Launchora audience and eventually my podcast audience, which grew out of Launchora and then word of mouth spread it, I knew that I'm dealing with younger people. I'm dealing with people who connect to this feeling that they're alone when they feel something. And because I was like that when I was their age. So before I even wrote for audio, I started writing stories within the Launchora platform, which were all pretty much similar to what I write for audio now. And some of them were inspired by my short stories and plays from before.
Okay.
So it was a really easy thought that if I'm writing fiction, it's going to be exploring the concept of human interaction, communication, and longing to be understood, and to this idea that what is love and why is it a word that everyone throws around, but everyone has their own definition for it. How often do we have words in language that do not have a simple definition? And love just happens to be one of those words. So it was very easy to be like, this is what I know I can do. This is what I know I can create. And frankly, it, to me, resonates more than any other story I've ever experienced. I grew up on 90s Bollywood. For me, a Shah Rukh Khan movie or a Yash Chopra movie is ingrained into what I think human connection is about. Even though they're exaggerated and they're fantasy-like, the meaning of the story is universal. It's coming up with these ideas that I just really enjoy. So for me, it was a very easy thought that, if I'm going to write fiction, it's going to be love stories.
Yeah. And you're doing a wonderful job at it. You don't need me to tell you. I think you have millions of fans and listeners who I think love your content. And yeah, it's very evident even when I heard your shows that there is a lot of nostalgia because I'm a 90s kid too, which I could really feel from the shows, which I think was just amazing to hear. So yeah, so speaking of your fiction podcasts, I know you've been doing a lot of them in Hindi recently. How did you decide to make that switch from English to Hindi? And, what kind of drove you to start making podcasts in another language?
That too was a product of feedback from the listener and just studying the listener market.
Right.
The I always wrote in English. Like I studied how to write in college, where English is the way you communicate, and it's what, like, I studied playwriting, and there's no way I'm going to be sitting in an American university writing plays in Hindi. So it never came to me that that's something you can do. And even when I moved back to India, everything I wrote was in English because it was the language that I was taught creative expression in.
Right.
Because like I said, over here in schools, I didn't feel encouraged or anything. And Hindi always felt like, I don't know about you, but you grew up in Chennai, you said, right?
Chennai, yeah.
That's where you're from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Delhi, like my school would call English the second language. And
Okay.
the first language was English. Hindi was the second language. Third language for me was French. For some people, it was Sanskrit and German. So to me, it sadly felt like a second language, which I'm supposed to study and get good grades in. And in 8th grade, I just left Hindi after, because they gave us a choice. But so yeah, I never gave writing in Hindi any thought. And it also felt like that's what Yash Chopra does. I can't do that. Like it's like even if I'm watching an English movie, I'm like, you have this part of your brain that's like, I'm not Tarantino, so I can't ever write a movie.
Right.
You always compare yourself to the greatest of all time.
True.
And then you demoralize yourself. And then eventually you start realizing, wait, Tarantino started somewhere.
Yeah.
You're not going to become him ever because he barely writes love stories. So I don't think I'm even close to that path. But you do realize that Tarantino's best is not his first draft. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to try my own first draft one day. So eventually, when I started making English fiction content, I thought, I made a little play that was about 30 minutes or so. And it was split into 6 episodes. And I thought, okay, this is how it's done quite well. And this was in Jan to Feb of 2020. It was like, this has done quite well. It was called One More Night with Meera. And I was reading the whole thing. I was listening, and people started asking me, is there a Hindi version? And I was like, why would I make a Hindi version? I'm not a Hindi writer. And then it felt like, oh, that's a bad idea to ignore a listener giving you this feedback.
Right.
That in Hindi, this story would feel different.
Right.
And probably because of that, the way, I grew up, I just thought you write in English because you want to have a global audience. And all my listeners, 75 or 78% of the listeners of that show were coming from India. 20% were Launchora users from around the world.
Okay.
So I thought, well, if 75 to 80% of the people are Indian, I could do an experiment where I could rewrite the whole script in Hindi and release it with the same actors, re-record it, make it as a new show. And what happened was that a 30-minute play became a 42-minute play because I turned it into Hindi. Not because the actors slowed down how they were speaking. I just ended up having a lot more to say when I started, reaching to that part of me as a storyteller. That all the dialogues that I grew up listening to and watching in movies, I was like, oh, this is the outlet. This is why I've seen DDLJ, 100 times. This is how that skill set is going to come to use. So that became the experiment. And the Hindi one did 2.5 times the listens of the English one.
Okay.
So after that, it became almost an easy decision that in order to have the reach and the story reach as many people as I hope it can, you start feeling a little greedy as a writer. Like, I know more people will listen to it if I make it in Hindi.
Right.
And I somehow have started having this block go away that only Yash Chopra can write Hindi dialogue. So yeah, maybe I can do it too. And that's when the whole Hindi journey started, just less than 2 years ago. And now everything, like you said, everything I made in the last 2 years in fiction is in Hindi.
Yeah. And it's incredible. And, which kind of, again, I was thinking, how different is it to, write in English and then write in another language, in Hindi? Is it similar or is it very different, the process?
It is, rewriting is different from writing from scratch. So if I'm rewriting an English thing into Hindi, then it's more like, okay, I'm almost adapting someone else's writing from my Hindi brain now.
Okay.
That was an English brain. This is my Hindi brain.
Okay.
But writing something from scratch in Hindi is I do feel I'm no longer accessing the English creative side of me. It does feel like it's a different aspect of my personality. Perhaps it's a different part. It's almost like when you're writing, you're a writer, but when you're editing your own writing, you're not the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
You're the person who is kind of now making sure it makes sense. You kind of have to put on a different hat. And that's what writing in Hindi has felt like. It, and I don't know if many people feel this way, but for me, initially all my thoughts would be in English, even if I was taking notes.
Oh, okay.
That, this character is going to do this character is going to do this is what's going to happen in the next episode, this is the journey and the arc of the characters. But once I got the hang of writing stuff in Hindi, then all my ideas were coming in Hindi as well. I don't know if you've noticed, but like a few of my shows, there's a very musical theme to them.
Yeah.
They're named after songs. Each episode is based on a song. And all of that is just to give my brain a direction to go into. If an episode is called Dil To Pagal Hai, then that story is going to be somehow referencing that title in some way. It's going to be absorbing what that means, that why do we think that the dil is something that gets to have its own nervous system, that it gets to have its own brain, basically? Why do we dissociate this idea? Okay, oh, dil to bachcha hai. It's like, it's yours, right? It's something that it can't function without you, but why do we give it all this power? So that's where all these ideas would start coming. That and then once you start writing in Hindi, then it's very weird to go back. I've had that experience. It feels very weird because it feels like if I haven't written in English for like 6 months and then I have to go back, it feels like I took a 6-month break from accessing that part of my brain.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's really cool that you can kind of write and produce content in 2 different languages. It's not I can kind of speak 4, but I've never attempted writing in another language apart from English. So it's something I'd love to try and see how that works out. But I think it's really cool that you can do that for sure. Coming to which, you do podcasts in Hindi, most of your fiction podcasts are around love. Do you think you'd explore other genres? Because I know your first short story was pretty much a dystopian story. So would you ever try doing something, say, in true crime, science fiction, horror?
I'm not going to say I won't, but it would really depend on what I think the audience wants at the moment.
Okay.
Because even all these shows, like, it's not like I think about love all the time.
Of course.
It's almost like, and it's something that even I have my characters explore. It's this idea that when you're thinking about something, that's when you're thinking about it. When you don't know where you are in your head, you're not always going to be thinking of all these thoughts. So true crime, horror, thrillers. I do like dramas.
Okay.
when it comes to audio fiction, I write what I'm attracted to, really. So I'm not a huge thriller and horror fan in audio,
Okay.
just because I think there's a lot of people that are making it, and
Okay.
I definitely appreciate the production value that they put in. Like someone like Indian Noir is doing stuff that
Yeah.
I don't think there's
Yeah.
literally no one like him
True.
who does that. So I don't think I have anything new to say that someone
Hmm.
like Nikesh is already, not explored.
Yeah.
And same comes with true crime. I did want to explore the idea of a fictional true crime show
Okay.
where you don't know. I don't know if you've seen, but there's at least in the US, like a couple cool shows were made where they were fake true crime fictional shows, where a podcaster goes out into the universe to solve a true crime because that's what everyone in the US seems to be doing. And she ends up basically entangling herself into the mystery of what she was. So it became very meta.
Okay.
So I like that human approach, because for me the listener is the audience. Like I'm never making a show for another podcaster like me, because they'll
Okay.
probably hear all the technical stuff that I try to do. So
Hmm.
I keep everything bare bones. I barely have music in my shows because
Hmm.
I really want the listener to feel like this is a real thing a person is saying.
Right.
So if I went into thriller and horror and true crime, I would be very, very grounded. The
Okay.
same way I approach all these shows. Even my last show, Silsila Ye Chahat Ka, I knew I was writing what was an anti-love story.
Okay.
But even if you want to talk about the fact that these two characters, and at least in that story, are people who are devoid of love. They've
Okay.
been either by choice or through someone else's choice, do
Hmm.
not have love in their life.
Hmm.
What would those two people be like? How would they interact with each other? So that became the basis of that story. So, and for me, that's almost it's not a thriller. It's not, but there's a suspenseful element and there's a sinister element to the story, which comes
Right.
out by the last two episodes. And so I like exploring things completely from that human element, that is this something the listener will relate to? And
I
if it
see.
ends up being a little dark, if it ends up being a little
Hmm.
um, thrillerish, yeah, I would love to explore all that.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. But yeah, I think it's especially in podcasting, it's very easy, I think, to kind of experiment and see what you can do with different genres and even sort
Yeah.
of mix genres in a way and see where you can go with it. Um, but yeah, what then makes a good story for you? What do you think makes a good story? I know that's a very subjective question, which is why I'm asking that.
I think at least the parts that I'm attracted to about stories is the intention there
Hmm.
that the audience's experience matters. Because what I do find lacking sometimes, and why I get self-critical of my own stuff, that whole thing of you judge yourself before anyone else can judge you, right?
Yeah.
The reason, like, all my stories will be very, very specific in like 10 minutes, 12 minutes. The whole idea is that why do I deserve 10 minutes of your listening time? You could
Okay.
spend this on, $100 million show on Netflix. Why would you spend it on this guy who's giving it to you for free? I don't
Hmm.
have all those things that other places do. So why is your time right now worthy of this experience? So that's what I look for in a story too. Is the intention to entertain? Is the intention to tell me something that I may not have thought about before?
Hmm.
Is the plot? I mean, my stories have very loose plots
Right.
because I really want the characters to drive everything, especially in audio where it's either one or max two voices in what I do. The
Hmm.
people have to be interesting. The thoughts
Right.
they have, the characters, the things they say, they have to sound like something you and I would think or say. When
Okay.
something sounds properly scripted,
Hmm.
um, it loses that connection that I'm looking for, which is to feel like these are real people. So that's
Okay.
what I look for when I'm listening or watching or anything.
Hmm.
I'll watch a bad movie if I think the person who made it loved it.
Hmm.
If you look like you really need people to see why this story need to be told, and you
Hmm.
focus on my experience and you look like you had fun making it, I'm drawn to that kind of content.
No, I completely resonate with that because I know I used to read a lot while growing up, and one book that really stayed with me was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott.
Mhm.
I can go back to that book so many times, and I feel like I always take back something new from it. I relate to it, I think, also because of the age and stage of my life I'm in at that point. It's suddenly I relate to one character I never thought I'd relate to, and it's amazing when a story can do that for you. So I completely understand, what you're talking about. Also loved Bollywood movies while growing up. I think I was like a television baby because I would be glued to TV all the
Yeah.
time. So then, what are stories that have impacted you and, kind of inspired you to write in a way? I'm sure there must be because I think every writer,
Yeah.
every person has one or two or even multiple stories like that which stay with them. So what are those for you?
It's definitely in the many category. There's initially I always, because of the whole, like I said, the English writer brain, Hindi writer brain, because
Mm,
initially I never thought I would be someone who writes dialogue in Hindi.
right.
I would only feel like I love watching these movies, but there's no way that I can do that.
Hmm.
And I felt that way. Like I mentioned, I felt that way about every single Yash Chopra movie,
Hmm.
from the stuff he did in the 60s and 70s, and then
Hmm.
the Shah Rukh years and all of that stuff. It to me is real. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is Kabhi Kabhi, which I saw
Okay.
probably as a teen,
Okay.
and no way should I have found that movie to be something that would resonate with me, because it's about like generational love.
Yeah.
It's about someone not having it, and
Hmm.
then 25 years later their kids meet and they
Hmm.
want to fall in love with each other, which should not be something a 12-year-old should relate to. But I just loved the idea of using music to tell a story. And that's
Right.
what I really resonate with Indian movies, is because we have this extra element
Hmm.
where two characters suddenly start singing, but they're saying things which in the dialogue version of the story they're sometimes not able to say, and the
Right.
truth of their actual character and their feelings
Hmm.
is revealed in song form, but the song is a dream sequence, so you'll never know. So I really found stuff like that to be very fun. But if I had to think of like what things made me want to write,
Yeah.
it was the style I write in is very much inspired by Richard Linklater's Before trilogy.
Okay.
There's Before Sunrise, Before
Yeah.
Sunset, and then Before Midnight. And I saw them pretty much as I was growing up. I think I saw Before Sunrise when I was 13. And
Hmm.
right then, Before Sunset came out when I was 15.
Okay.
And then Before Midnight came out when I was 24, probably. I think it was like, um, 10 years later or something. So for me, like I definitely grew up with that idea of a story where just two people talking. And
Hmm.
I love the idea of that being the core experience of the audience as well, is that
Hmm.
you're a third person in a two people conversation. That's what I
Hmm.
was always drawn to. And in terms of books, it's very hard to not be inspired by epics, which I know I'll never write like an epic fantasy, which is why it's super fun to read Lord of the Rings. Because
Okay.
you truly are reading it to be entertained. My writer brain is not on if I'm
Yeah.
reading Lord of the Rings, because
Hmm.
it's excellence on another level of what a storyteller can come up with.
Hmm.
And I feel inspired to just be a story listener and a story audience,
Hmm.
but never a writer. If I want to feel bad as a writer, I'll watch something epic. And that'll
Okay.
be my way to be like, okay, I'm going to bring myself down because people say nice things. Like you've said nice things to me about what I do. Today, I'm going to have to watch something that is completely out of my realm
Oh
just
my
to feel
God.
like, yeah, I'm not a big deal, you know?
No, but I mean, well, you don't have to do that, but okay, I guess whatever floats your boat.
I
I
mean, I'm
guess.
not going to regret a Lord of the Rings extended edition marathon. It's only going to take 11 hours or something.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I'm like, that's gonna be a really long binge watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, just even with regard to films, when you were actually talking about Yash Chopra films and Hindi movies, I was just kind of recollecting that I grew up on a lot of Malayalam cinema while growing up because my parents would
Hmm.
always keep a Malayalam movie on, and over the weekends, that was like a staple for me. So I feel like that's something now that I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, actually, even that kind of influenced me in a way. But yeah, talking about books, I know you're writing a novel. What can you tell us about that? And by when can we read it?
It's a very interesting question for me to even attempt to answer because I already finished writing a novel. It's something I wrote pretty much during the COVID time that we've had
Okay.
now almost 2 years. And this book is kind of it's weird for me to even call it a book because it's kind of a culmination of everything I've ever learned how to write, all leading up to this one piece of story.
Okay.
And I actually may not even it's it's hard for me to divulge too much, but I can tell you what the book is about, and then
Okay.
I'll tell you why I'm not divulging too much about when you can read it.
Okay.
So I started writing only dialogue. Like I said, I studied playwriting. For me,
Hmm.
two people talking is the greatest thing ever. For which I should have a special mention for a person who is like J.R.R. Tolkien in
Okay.
terms of epic writing, but
Okay.
writes two people talking is Aaron Sorkin.
Hmm.
Everything he's ever written, I have seen it. I have read the scripts of it. I
Hmm.
will probably rewatch his movies and his TV shows just because it's super musical, and
Hmm.
I have no way of ever reaching that level of dialogue writing.
Hmm.
So my book came as an idea very slowly. It's
Okay.
based on it sparked as a story that I wrote 6 7 years ago. One of the first
Okay.
things I ever wrote for on my platform was a story called I Want a Divorce.
Okay.
And the idea came that, oh, what happens when a partner says that to their partner,
Hmm.
man or woman, for the first time? What is the
Okay.
next 10 minutes like? And that's
Hmm.
basically how I come up with stories. I just think of what if someone suddenly said this? So what if someone suddenly revealed
Hmm.
something that is complete change of status quo and
Hmm.
completely changes both realities that these two people think they're living in?
Hmm.
And then I started writing a bunch of other stuff. Eventually, when it came to writing a novel, the
Hmm.
goal wasn't that I need to tell a text-based story again, because I'd moved to
Okay.
audio already.
Right.
The goal was to tell a story where I play with the idea of what perception do we as readers and listeners bring to characters based on who we are.
Okay.
So my book, the previous title was Scenes from a Marriage Across Time.
Hmm.
I've now changed it, and
Hmm.
I'm not gonna tell you what it is because of
Okay.
many reasons.
Yeah.
Because I'm now I wrote what turned out to be probably my next big project in
Okay.
audio,
Okay.
because the whole book was written in dialogue,
Okay.
and the whole idea is that I tell you the story of a marriage across
Hmm.
7 chapters.
Hmm.
When you read it, you don't know the genders of the characters because I
Oh.
never reveal, they never discuss it. They never mention he, him, this, that. They don't mention pronouns. They don't add all that. And it was written in English.
Okay.
And when I finished it, I was like, this is done, but publishing is not something I want to focus on because
Okay.
it's, frankly, having worked in text publishing
Mm-hmm.
as an open platform, I don't really see an immediate future for me to jump into book publishing for myself.
Okay.
It's just not where I think my path is. I know a lot of writers. I've spoken to like over 100 authors because of my JLF show and my
Hmm.
story talking show, and it's just not my personality to become an author.
Okay.
So my book is now, hopefully by the end of this year, I will have started. It is technically an epic because it's, over 50,000 words and stuff, and it's all dialogue. And I'm now just turning it into a Hindi version, and I'm
Okay.
gonna possibly release the Hindi version first,
Wow.
and then the book comes as a companion piece that will probably be available on Launchora, the platform.
Hmm.
So for people who are listening to the show, they can also read what the book originally intended in this format, because yeah, why not? That's why I'm being very like guarded and oh yeah about it,
Yeah.
because it's very much a work in progress. I
Yeah.
wrote a blueprint for my next big epic, which I wasn't ready to make
Hmm.
until this stage in my career. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I feel like I'm ready. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm curious and I'm excited to see what this
So
is.
yeah, by the end of this year, something I would have at least started the series, because it's going to be long. And the
Okay.
audio version is going to have multiple versions, because I do like the idea of the same words. If a woman asks for a divorce, how is it different from a man asking for a divorce? So the
Hmm.
same story will have an exact replica of the whole characters being switched,
Hmm.
where in one entire show, the man is this person, the woman is this person. And in the entire different version of the show, it's the exact opposite, where all this dialogue is now this voice, and all this dialogue is
Okay.
not this voice. And eventually, I mean, even bigger, because it's written as a blueprint, my goal is to write even more inclusive stories, make the exact same show again, male, female, female, male, then male, male, then female, female.
Wow.
So covering all aspects of marriage that exist and might exist in the future, because we are evolving as a species. So yeah, it is my version of an epic.
Oh, that's incredible. I cannot wait to listen to this. I'm sure everyone listening also is curious now to see what this is all about. Um, but yeah, now we're kind of coming towards the end of this interview, and we always end with these last two questions. So first off, what are your current aspirations? What are you looking forward to in the near or even distant future? I'm assuming one is the show, the book that you just spoke about, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I I'm waiting to start at least 3 other shows,
Oh, wow.
and they're either in partnership with a platform, because audio is a very interesting space right now, and India is a very cool place to be making it,
Hmm.
because it's basically um, majority driven by these music platforms, which is why a
Okay.
lot of my content has music, inspirations in it.
Hmm.
So I'm working on what would be, I've pitched, and we are in the process of producing what would be some really cool things to do with audio, things that you can't basically do in any other medium. And that's what really uh, inspires me about working in this space,
Hmm.
because it is a little bit of the wild, wild west right now. It's
Hmm.
very
Yeah.
exciting. It has a very low barrier for entry.
Hmm.
If you can write, if you have a laptop, if you have even a normal microphone, you don't have to go and buy an expensive
Yeah.
one. You can become an audio storyteller. So I think whatever I make, at least in the near future, is going to be in audio, and it is going to embrace audio, just like my previous shows have continued to be, where I want you to feel like if you were reading this, if you were watching this, it would be completely different. Audio is the ideal medium to tell this story. So that's, yeah, hopefully I'll have some cool things to announce in the next couple of months. Yeah.
Can't wait. And finally, what is a piece of advice or learning you'd like to share with people? Can be creative, professional, personal, something you wish people were more aware of or knew more about.
So I think advice really has to be stuff that you actually have followed yourself, and it's not just, oh, do this. And
Yeah.
I don't like saying like unrealistic things like, oh, write 1,000 words every day. There's no way.
Yeah.
I know people that do that. I know
Hmm.
people who ask writers to try it out. I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't know who the writer was, but it's like a very famous author who said that if you write something every day, by like the 100th day, you would have had a worse day and a best day. And that's when you know you're a writer, because you would have experienced both. I wouldn't say that, because I'm too nice to myself to have a day where I don't write anything. I'll be like, koi baat nahi, that's how I treat myself. So what I do want people who are starting their writing journey, especially if it's in audio, is I really try to tell people that your first thought and your first draft of any thought, of any piece of writing, don't ever judge it or compare it to anyone's final draft. The
Right.
same thing of like, you don't watch a Tarantino movie and then be like, main to kabhi aisa nahi likh paunga.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to write like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this guy's a genius and he's spent his entire 40-year career doing this. So have you spent 40 years trying to write? In 40 years, you're going to be better than you were today. So just have that path figured out, that if I'm going to be a writer, if I'm even going to take writing as something that maybe it's not my primary thing, but it's just something I love doing, if it's my passion, if it's my favorite way to live my life, outside of whether I make money from it or not, just make sure that that everyone started out with not knowing how to do it. Everyone started, and that's the one thing we have in common with all writers. That's the one thing I have in common with J.R.R. Tolkien, is that there was a day he didn't know how to write, and then he did. So it's the coolest aspect of writing, is that you get to just call yourself one by just doing it. You don't need to like be a doctor, you don't need to go to med school. So yeah, I'd say, and the whole thing about first draft, last draft, but the final thing I would say, especially with audio, is appreciate and value the audience's time. Too many people end up overindulging, and I don't want to sound critical of the kind of stuff that I've listened to and read over the years, but it's the advice I give to anyone starting out, is value the listener's time, because you may spend, I spend 10, 20, 30, 40 hours sometimes just on a 10-minute episode.
Yeah.
So doesn't mean it deserves to be 15 minutes because I spent 40 hours on it.
True.
It deserves to be 10 minutes because that's what the audience's experience is going to be. Then let it be 10 minutes. Don't add that extra 5 minutes because you worked really hard on it. People spend 4 years making a movie. It's still 2 hours. They don't make a 4-hour movie like that. So that's what I would say.
No, and I think that's much needed advice. I know I could definitely use that right now. But yeah, so usually we would end the interview here, but we have a surprise element to this one
Hmm.
because you're a Bollywood fan. So I thought, why not be a little more cliche and just add a rapid fire round? Because why not?
Sure. Why not?
Why not? I mean, so yeah, I think we're just gonna quickly go over these. So your rapid fire round. First off, I'm gonna ask you a bunch of this or that questions, giving you
Hmm.
two options, and you tell me which one you find better or you prefer.
Okay.
So starting off, writing or performing.
Writing.
Okay. Um, your podcasts or your novel?
Ooh. Well, they might now be one and the same.
Yeah.
So I love my novel. Absolutely love it. I love, yeah, what I made. Yeah. So I'll say
Okay.
novel right now
Okay
because I'll
then.
make it into something, a podcasting thing
I,
later.
I figured after your
Yeah.
previous answer, books or films?
Films.
Okay. Dharmatma or Bazigar?
Oh, that's very, very interesting. How did you know that I liked Dharmatma?
Because I've
It's
been
very
listening to all your podcasts in the past
okay.
week.
Um, okay. Can I give a longer answer for this? Because I want to justify it.
Okay, fine, sure.
Dharmatma is based on The Godfather, which is hard to beat.
Hmm.
Bazigar is a very unique story, which was very, very, I can't believe that movie existed.
Hmm.
So the I will say Bazigar, just because it was truly unique for its time.
Okay.
But Dharmakma is a classic. Yeah. I wasn't born when it was made, so I want to
Yeah.
say Bazigar because I actually saw it when I was like I was 3 years old. Imagine seeing that movie when you're three in a
Oh my
movie theater.
God.
Shah Rukh Khan throws off Shilpa Shetty from the top of the building. Like once you see that as a 3-year, you're like, oh, movies are awesome. Yeah.
I'm amazed you remember that, but okay. Okay, so moving on. Which podcast of yours are you most proud of and why?
The second season of my show on JioSavan, Tumne Kisi Se Kabhi Pyar Kiya Hai,
Hmm.
is I'm very proud of it because it's the longest I've ever worked on a piece of writing and then performing. It took 8 months to from start to finish to make these 30 episodes, and it's a proper linear story, which was very fun to write because just from a writing point of view, the the thing I learned how to do with that one, which helped me eventually with my novel as well, because I was working on it at the same time, is that in between episodes, the characters continue living.
Okay. Interesting.
So embrace that and have things happen. In my story, all the major twists and turns in that season were happening in between the episodes. And that's how you make the episode interesting because
Okay.
the person is now reacting to something crazy that happened in between the episodes. So yeah, I really enjoyed making that.
Yeah. Which is Tara, right? That's the second season.
Tara,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What's the best part of being in a creative job?
What isn't? I can't imagine. Um, I don't. I would say people actually. I would ask this question of musicians because I'm like
Yeah.
envious of musicians. I think that what they do is
Hmm.
insane.
Okay.
But then people talk to me and they're like, "How do you write?" And I was like, "Have you ever seen someone play the guitar from like, you know?"
Hmm.
Um, so for me, it's like the fact that I get to do it for a living is insane. It makes no sense. Yeah, that's the best part that I'm living insanity in a good way.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool way to put it. What's the most what's the most frustrating part about being in a creative job then?
Oh, this voice in your head that tells you that you're out of it. You have
Okay.
nothing else left to say. That's
Yeah.
yeah, it's very
Relatable.
scary.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Okay. If you were to write an autobiography, what would the title be?
I have written an autobiography.
Really?
I wrote it. Yeah, it's one of the first things I did on my platform, Launchora, and it's very much. I wrote a book. This because it's not a novel. I don't consider it a book. Not to judge people who write autobiographies and nonfiction, but I wrote it when I was 23 to 25, and the book was written in real time, as in I took the 2-year time.
Okay.
Which was all about building the Launchora platform, because I started when I was 23
Mhm.
and I finished it when I was 25. And the 2-year journey, and I called it Laksh Part 1 because I'm very full of myself.
Okay.
And my whole plan is to never write a second part, because I think that's the best, most fun thing to just leave in the middle, is
Okay.
call something Part 1 and never
And just
release a
leave
Part
it.
2. Never. Yeah.
Please.
So that I called it that to never write it again. Yes.
So clearly, we're only getting an authorized biography at some point in the future. But yeah, please
maybe.
don't make this a podcast. People will be very offended if you don't make a part 2.
Yeah.
But yeah. Last question. Since this episode is releasing on Valentine's week, what does love mean to you?
The whole thing I love about the concept of love is that it's there isn't a love story in real life, and obviously fictionally, which is all inspired by real life, where there aren't misunderstandings. So what I think love is, it's the feeling of making someone feel understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
beautiful answer. And on that lovely note, we have now officially come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for being here, Laksh. I absolutely love this conversation. I hope you had fun.
I had a lot of fun, and thank you for some really insightful questions and for doing a lot of research I didn't expect about me. So I really appreciate that. That was super fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was my conversation with Lakshya Datta. I really enjoyed that chat, and it still feels surreal that I got to talk to one of the people who's been a source of inspiration for this podcast. Closing this episode with an excerpt from an audio show written and produced by Laksh. Happy Valentine's Day to you and your loved ones. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you next week with a new guest and a new chronicle to share. Talk soon!
What you're about to hear is part 1 of a 6-part audio drama that I made called One More Night with Meera, starring Rijal Kataria and Gauri Saxena.
Neil?
Hi, Meera. Hi.
What are you doing here?
I was just, what are you wearing?
What? This? It's a summer dress. You don't like it?
It's snowing.
It is. Right. I guess I don't feel that cold.
Can I come in?
Yeah, sure. Come on in.
This place is, it's nice. It's huge. You've done well. Good for you.
Oh, thank you. So, what brings you to, here?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to just drop in. I should have called first. I should have. I'm sorry.
No, please don't apologize. I was just curious. We haven't seen each other or talked in,
Years. 6 years.
Really? Well, yes, yeah.
Are you alone?
Yeah, right now. I'm sorry, you were saying something about...
Why I'm here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound so... I'm being rude. It's just a surprise and I really wasn't expecting...
It's okay. I mean, you can say shock. I won't be offended to hear that you're shocked to see me again. It's okay.
I am surprised and shocked, yes, but it's just you're here and I really wasn't. I had absolutely no idea.
Sorry. It's my fault. I should have called first.
No, it's okay.
No,
okay.
it's not. I should have called. I could have called. I mean, no. Actually, I would have called, but it wasn't really an option. It's been so long. I didn't have your new number, so I didn't know whether I could reach you or...
I still have the same number.
You do?
Yeah. Had it since the first day of college when we met at that pizza place. What was it called? Something really cheesy.
Something cheesy. That's right. You do remember.
Of course I remember.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that you haven't forgotten our time together.
Neil...
You've got a backyard. Nice, so posh. So not you, though.
Why are you here?
I'm not sure. What exactly is this?
This? It's a sitting area, couch thing.
For humans?
For cats.
I was afraid you'd say that. I almost forgot you were a cat person. I don't see any cats around here, though.
Did you come here to judge how I decorate my living room, Neil? Or my choice in pets?
No. I'm sorry, I was just curious. I was actually going to this thing tomorrow. I was thinking about it, and then I was thinking about you, and I was in your driveway after that, so...
What? How did you even know where I lived?
You think I'm stalking you?
No. I'm just curious. I haven't heard from you in 6 years.
And whose fault is that? It's okay. I'm fine. I didn't come here to accuse you for what you did or didn't do, so...
Neil,
It's funny. It's funny, you know. I mean, when I was sending you all those letters and messages, you could just choose to ignore me. And I would just wait and wait. And you were probably hoping that I would just give up one day, which I did. I did. But now, today, here I am. I can just show up and face you and tell you exactly what I think, and you can't ignore me, Meera.
I thought you weren't here to accuse me.
I'm not. I'm so sorry, I regressed. I'm not. It's okay. Go on, pick it up. I won't mind. Must be your boyfriend or husband.
Hey, honey, yeah, I'm at home. Oh, you can't. Is everything okay? Oh, no, it's fine. I'll be okay. Okay. Yeah. I will. Okay. See you soon. Bye. I love you too.
So, how long do we have?
For what?
That's the end of part 1. The story continues in part 2. Tune in to One More Night with Meera on your favorite podcast app.